Time. Where did it all go? It seems like my life has passed before my eyes. So very quickly. All of the highs and all of the lows. Sometimes it's almost as though my life has been a dream. And someday I'll wake up and find out that it really is real. The day-to-day things that we do, having a delicious cup of cappuccino, seeing the steam rise from the cup, the soft feeling of your child's hand in your hand, those tiny little fingers, the feeling of love that just warms your heart. How fast it all is going by. How fast, like the wind and the clouds, they roll by so quickly, don't they? Hello, welcome. This is Sandra Hart. Thank you for joining me at Life Over 60. In August of 2017, I put up a video about what it's like to be a writer. I combined the story of how I think I became a writer and a little bit about my life. I combined it with a story that is finally coming out on March 27. And that is a story that is in a book that has been written by my cousin's daughter, Nina Giles. It's called The Bridesmaid's Daughter. I think you probably have heard me talk about my cousin Carolyn before. She left our industrial town in Ohio. She was 10 years older than I was, so I was quite young when she left to seek her fame and fortune in New York City. She became a Conover model right away, and then she signed with the Ford agency with Eileen and Jerry Ford. It was a very brand new agency that eventually became a mega powerhouse for years and years. But she became a model for them, lived at the Barbizon Hotel, and while she was at the Barbizon Hotel, she befriended a young girl from Philadelphia, and that just happened to be Grace Kelly. She and Grace continued that friendship and maintained that friendship for a lifetime. My cousin Carolyn was a bridesmaid in Grace's wedding. Her first child Grace was a godmother to her very first child. But my cousin, who grew up in a blue-collar family and moved to New York to seek her fame and fortune, became my mentor. She knew that I always wanted to be an actress, and when I moved to New York, I too lived at the Barbizon Hotel, and boy, if you knew how small those rooms were, they were probably 6 by 12. I've never seen a room so small in my life. I left my big bedroom in Ohio and came to this tiny little closet in New York. But I was so excited. You know, I used to lie across my bed at night and listen to William B. Williams come from his radio broadcast from New York, and I would dream of coming to the big city. So when I finally got there, it was absolutely so exciting. I was on the 17th floor. I'd never been in such a high building in my life. And I remember walking to the window, throwing up the window in my room and leaning out of the window and looking up and looking down the street and looking up in the air, and I could see the top of the Empire State Building. It was so thrilling. I really felt that I was in the big time, living in this beautiful city of New York. Well, New York can be a very lonely place if you don't know anybody. But it just so happens that I was enrolled in a school after college that my parents thought I really should go to. It was called Catherine Gibbs. It was more or less a finishing school for young women, and they taught you how to do shorthand and typing so that you could earn a living while you were in New York. And my parents thought that if I was going to be a starving actress, there was some way that I had to support myself. So they told me that I had to go there in order for them to be supportive of me living in the city. But while I was in the city, my cousin Carolyn really took me under her wing. I would spend Thanksgiving at their house, and I really felt, until I met a lot of friends at school, I felt that I had a family far away from home. Life does not always, let me put it this way, our lives do not always pan out the way we want to. I mean, our plan is really not always the plan that's going to be. It happened in my life. Maybe it's happened in your life. Well, it happened in my cousin's life. With all the fame and fortune that she had, she also had a very dark side to her life. I've always said that behind fame and fortune, behind anyone's life, you never what goes on behind closed doors. My cousin had 3 children, and after the birth of her 3rd child, Nina, the author of this upcoming book, she suffered a mental decline and eventually throughout the years became penniless and homeless and wound up living in a women's shelter in New York. Her problem could have been helped, but she was never diagnosed properly. We now know that Carolyn suffered from postpartum depression after her 3rd child. She was never given therapy. She was never diagnosed properly. She was eventually diagnosed, but actually we know now misdiagnosed, with schizophrenia. After all of the fame that she had, going to Grace's wedding in Monaco, hobnobbing with all the celebrities, being on Page 6. Grace had dated Ole Cassini, and they would double date and go out together. So Carolyn really had this wonderful celebrity life, this little girl from Ohio who made her own way all by herself. I've always been so grateful for my cousin Carolyn for mentoring me and taking me under her wing while I lived at the Barbizon Hotel and while I was in New York. I would see her from time to time as an adult because I left New York to have a career elsewhere. And when I came back, I was an adult, and Carolyn by that time was living in the shelter. I went to visit her in the shelter. I tried to tell her that her mother really wanted her to go back to Ohio to live. She loved New York so much that she didn't want to go back. But I would see her from time to time sketching in Central Park. I saw her one time in front of Bergdorf Goodman and across and on Fifth Avenue. I saw her one time near the Plaza Hotel. I would see her from time to time, and she always recognized me in the city. She always looked so beautiful. Carolyn never lost her beauty. But after talking with her, you could tell that she was talking to me from another sphere that I couldn't understand. And at the time, I didn't realize that the relationship she had with her youngest daughter was so bizarre and sad because of her mental illness. I reconnected with Nina maybe about 5 years ago. I had lost track of Carolyn's children back in the 1980s, and I had lost track of Nina maybe when she was about 14 years old, way before that. I often wondered about Nina and how she was, whether she got married and what she was doing. But she eventually found me, as I said, about 5 years ago. And that's when we reconnected, and she told me about thinking about writing her story about her relationship with her mother's mental illness, and what it did to her path going forward as a young child whose mother was not in a normal mental condition while she was growing up. Basically, it is a wonderful story about a relationship between a mother and a daughter, a true story that's very poignant, beautiful, and moving. I can't wait till the book comes out. I am invited to the premiere book opening the end of March, and it's being held at the Barbizon, so it will be the first time that I've been back to the Barbizon in a long, long time. About 2 years ago, I was interviewed by a writer from Bust magazine. She was doing a story on the Barbizon. In case you don't know about the Barbizon Hotel, the Barbizon was a very, very famous hotel that was a hotel for women. And if you wanted your daughter to be safe in New York, you would send her to the Barbizon Hotel. We had to sign in and out. No men were allowed above the second floor in the Barbizon. We had a library, a dining room, a swimming pool. It really was, on Lexington Avenue, a very safe place to have your daughter live. When I was there, Nancy DuPont lived there. Alice Blair, who became a very, very good friend of mine, and a lot of celebrities' children stayed there. It really was a place that, if you do your research, it's a place where a lot of young starlets and a lot of famous people lived before they really were able to take off in their careers. It was a wonderful place, and my cousin would come to visit me from time to time, even though the room was so small. Living with mental illness, I never thought would ever happen in my life. But as you know or may not know, my late husband was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. So I am one of the victims, the family victims of someone who has had mental illness. And that's what really is so bad about, or unfortunate about people that are mentally ill. The worst victims really are those people that love them and that are around them, because the collateral mental damage of living with somebody who is mentally ill is very hard, it's very strong, and it stays with you forever. I hope you will all think about reading The Bridesmaid's Daughter. If you have a Kindle, I'm sure it's available on Kindle. It will be available at Amazon.com and Barnes & Nobles and at all book retailers everywhere. There are a few reviews that are already out, and I will put links below to those reviews. But I applaud Nina for stepping out of the shadows and sharing her story, because I think it will help a lot of other daughters and sons who maybe were raised by a mother or father with mental illness. It will help them understand the power of forgiveness, the power of understanding mental illness, and to take the blame off of the person who is affected with mental illness. It's very, very difficult, I know, because my husband became someone that I didn't even know. This wonderful man that I loved and cherished became more or less a monster. And he was a stranger. he became a stranger in my life. And that is what happened to Nina in a way, because the mother that she knew as a very, very little girl finally morphed into something that was a stranger and held her back from growing and having her own life. It's a very, very interesting, painful, true, poignant story. I hope you'll check it out. Thank you for coming today to hear me talk about The Bridesmaid's Daughter. If you are a reader, I hope you will take a chance and look at this book. And I hope that you will be good to yourself today, do something kind for someone else, and I know all of you have the biggest hearts ever, so share a piece of that with somebody this week. Take care, and I'll see you soon. I'll see you in my next video. Have a great, great day.